Hello, my name is Dr. B.K. Edmond, and this is another episode of the Nana Project podcast. Today, we are blessed to have Dr. Dazon Diallo, who's going to basically be being interviewed for our podcast.
It's so good to be on the other side of your mic. Thank you very, very much.
She was
happy to be here.
She did the first interview of me once we made the book. Okay, in terms of breast cancer survivors or people who've dealt with breast cancer that you know, who are you speaking on behalf of?
Oh, unfortunately, being a black woman who has worked my entire life with black women and our sexual and reproductive health, it's a whole lot of. Today, I think, in this moment, I'm going to have to speak on behalf of my sister, Dionne Haywood.
There you go.
I'm going to have to speak with the voice of my sister, Ngina Lithcott.
Gotcha.
I also want to speak on my sister who never knew me, but I have followed, listened, and played all her music, who is Busi Flango, who is a musician who also succumbed after more than four bouts with breast cancer in South Africa. So,
gotcha.
Yeah, and it's a global thing for me.
When we talk about what in the first one you mentioned was your first friend's name is what now?
Dionne Haywood.
When we talk about Dionne Haywood, what is it that she, what makes her special?
Well, what makes Dionne special is, first of all, she is a leader in her own right in the same kind of work. Dionne is an executive director of a fantastic organization in New Orleans called Women with a Vision, and she's been there since the organization was started, and she's been in the leadership for about 25 years of their 33 years. Dionne brings, I think, that same spirit and power of leadership that she has led with that organization that has primarily focused on women in the margins, women who are living with HIV, women who are addicted to drugs, women who are sex workers, transgender people who are been, penalized for their survival choices in their work. And then she takes that power, and as a person who's diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer twice, and literally upended how she was treated as a black woman, as a healthy sized woman, as a lesbian in a southern city. She even changed how services were delivered to her and other women during her own bout with breast cancer. So that's why Dionne stands out for me, because she brought the leadership and that social change spirit to changing how they engaged with her as a breast cancer patient.
There you go. What when you talk of the things that she gave you, what of the lessons that she gave you in life, what do you value the most? Which lesson do you value the most?
I think the one most is that she taught her providers to listen to the women. Listen to their stories when they tell you what they're experiencing, when they tell you what they know about their own breasts, about their own bodies. Listen to them. I think that if they had listened to her, she probably actually would have avoided that second bout, and she believes that herself.
Gotcha. If there was a short message that you give to young women who about breast health, what message would you give?
I think the most important thing that I would give as a message is that there is never a time when all of you isn't a part of all of who you are. And so taking care of all of you is what matters most. That from your mind to your body. And, our breasts are not sexual organs. A lot of people because we get objectified that way. But our breasts are nurturing. Our breasts serve us. Our breasts hold hormones. Our breasts hold a special place when it comes to giving life to other people in terms of birthing children and nurturing children and nourishing children. But in addition to that, it's almost like our hair. Everybody has different breasts and we do different things with them. And so having pride in what you are able to do with them, no matter what they look like, right? I'm serious, because somebody who walks around with big ones, right? There are all kinds of things. I make jokes about them, but at the same time, I take them very seriously, where I'm checking them all the time, because they are connected to the rest of who I am. And I think that is the most important thing that I would tell young women, is to take care of, just like you take care of all the other things that people see in terms of your beauty, Take care of your breasts in terms of the beauty you see in yourself.
Let me go ahead and ask. I gotta ask the question. The same first question you always ask me: who you is and who's your people. Like your grandmother.
You know that one? And we taught me back in my nana's kitchen,
right.
which is where this whole enterprise. That's where this whole thing comes from. Is being in my nana's kitchen.
Who's your people?
So, you know what? I'm Dazon Dixon Jallo. My family name is Dixon. I come from two amazing educators from two lines of incredible human beings all the way throughout. I am originally from a small town, Fort Valley, Georgia. We know it as Peach County. I grew up in an HBCU town, right? So I talk about how I grew up with black privilege. When I say I grew up with black privilege, I grew up in a black town with a black family that's still intact, right? My family, because they're educators, I had that kind of experience. So some people would call that middle class. It's like, I didn't have all of those things that the rich people in my class had. But I come from a place where education and health are completely intertwined. And I come from a people who believe, as my daddy used to always say, well, as long as you can read, you can do anything. So I come from that you have the power and the spirit and the ability that as long as you continue to learn, you can continue to change things. And that's what I've been able to do. So I came from that. I think being the rest of that black privilege story is growing up in a black household, in a black college town, and coming to a black college.
There you go, like Spelman.
Not only a black college, but the largest cluster of historically black colleges in the world in a black city. And then my entree into this whole life was I just happened to be on my campus at Spelman College the summer that Billy Avery brought together the very first ever national Black Women's Health Conference. That was in 1983. Can you imagine? We've been in this country how many hundreds of years? And that was the first time we had a national conference on Black Women's Health. That changed my life. And so then, after working for other people for a little while, I ended up starting my own organization, Sister Love, which became a Black women's organization.
Well,
and so that's my whole black privilege trajectory.
There you go. Well, you got a beautiful one. What I'm going to do, can you go ahead and quietly give us a tight bullet on Sister Love, because Sister Love is really taking you all over the world internationally. But then what I want to do is I want to lead into some of the places where we're trying to go with this Nana story. Okay?
Absolutely.
All right, go ahead.
So just for those, Sister Love is a 33-year-old sexual and reproductive justice organization. We started out with a lens on HIV and AIDS, but because for me, I came into this from reproductive rights, so reproductive health and rights. And for me, HIV for women, especially black women, especially for cisgender heterosexual black women, is an issue of sexual and reproductive rights, right? And so that's what we have built. We have built an organization that's based in intersectionality, that's interconnectivity. So whether we're doing direct services or whether we're doing policy, community education, or research, all of that is connected to us working together to not only center people with the lived experiences so that we can find out how to meet the needs best, but it's also the way for us to figure out how to solve our greatest problems, because it's through the lived experience that we learn what the best solutions are. So that's who we are as Sister Love. And so we're consistently innovating based on those lived experiences. And the intersections of all the things that show up in that whole experience as a black woman.
Yes, ma'am. Very quickly, we were talking about one of the things that we start with the Nana grant. Where did you get the concept of doing a grant or even applying for a grant to try and address triple negative breast cancer in the state of Georgia? She is actually the writer, author. Her team was the one who created the Nana Project, of which this book, Nana and the Bush Woman, that I authored, is part of. How did you come up with that?
If I drew back the lens a little bit, and it sounds odd when you come at it this way, but I am one of those people who fully embraces what I call the alignment, right? And that means understanding that everything in this universe is because it is. I don't believe in that, things happen for a reason. I believe that things happen because they happen, right? And so what you have to do when you embrace that is recognize the happening, Okay? So, first and foremost, I grew up in a household where my grandmother was called Nana.
Right.
And I do get to travel the world, and almost everywhere in the world, somebody has a Nana.
Mm-hmm.
And the second part to that is I had already been working on this other initiative where a good friend of mine who is a musician, Masiki Scales,
right.
Yo talked to him already.
Yeah.
That Masiki had just dropped an album, and on that was a tune called First Nanas, which we used for another initiative that we were doing around solidarity building in Black women's sexual and reproductive health. That was the Women Now Summit that we do every 2 years in Africa. And then you had come along with Nana and the Bushwoman, right? Mm-hmm. Now remember, I've been doing my radio show for 29 years. And every interview I do starts with, we are sitting at my Nana's kitchen table. So, Masiki's song, BK's book, my radio show, Sister Love, my Nana, who inspires me all the time, rest her soul, it just totally made sense for me. It just totally made sense that we were already looking at how do we bridge the arts with the public health work that we're doing. Because we are a people of culture. We are a people who, we can read books, but we read books where our stories are in them. And we listen to music, but we listen to music that has our beat in it, right? And we learn about our health from people who look like us, who sound like us, and who can express things the way we can receive them, right? So it totally made sense to me to let's put all these people in a room, in a project together, and see how we can change the conversation. Now, what we also do, which is really important, and that's what makes us a little different, is that we also work in the whole field of human rights, right? Reproductive justice is about building dignity and equity, especially for those who are in the margins. So even when you look at the breast cancer movement, even when you even go further deep and look at the breast cancer movement in Black people, there are still Black women who are not centered in that movement. Black women living with HIV. I just got one of my own women in our leadership program just received her stage 4 diagnosis with triple negative breast cancer last week. I talked to a woman, I was in London 2 weeks ago, and the woman who organized and invited me to this major event told me after I talked about this project, she said, Dazon, you don't even know this. She's a woman living with HIV in the UK. I'm a survivor of triple negative breast cancer. And she's not been a part of the breast cancer movement. So understanding that women living with HIV experience triple negative breast cancer. Lesbians who are Black experience triple negative breast cancer, like my friend Dion, and having to find herself a center in that work. People who are living with disabilities experience triple negative breast cancer, as well as transgender people, including those assigned masculine people assigned female at birth, experience triple negative breast cancer. You don't see the faces, you don't hear the stories or the lived experiences in all of the wonderful breast cancer messages that are out there that speak to their lived experience. That's why we're doing what we're doing.
Very, very interesting stuff. And you're absolutely right. And one of the things that it called upon me to do was basically do a deeper dive in terms of health care for lesbians and trans that were born female and transitioning to men in terms of the outcomes. And one of the things is, believe it or not, everyone will say there's really no good data. It's almost like it's the work. It's almost as bad as it's almost like it's akin to the argument with gun violence. You're not allowed to study gun violence in America. In other words, there's no federal funding for gun violence in America, and it's almost like there's been this major oversight in terms of this entire demographic, in terms of just simply getting quality information that you can treat them based upon what their needs are.
That's exactly
I commend you on the work that you've been doing. I also, because of that, I attended the Black Mothers Matter conference in DC, but I didn't just attend, I actually attended and paid attention.
Yeah.
So I was able to see some of the speakers and get exposed and get a full detailed lesson on the concept of human rights, how they tie into reproductive rights, and how they tie into the whole concept of black women's rights.
That's right.
And understanding that a lot of times healthcare is not designed in order to protect the black woman.
That's right.
So one of the things that we're trying to do with this NANA project is put things in place where we can broaden the base of people that we bring into the fold in terms of proper breast health care.
And we're bringing the reproductive justice lens to breast care, right? So the reproductive justice lens and what people have to understand about where this notion even comes from. 12 black women were sitting in a room at a conference in Chicago. And it was at the time when Hillary Clinton was still the first lady, and they were starting to talk about this whole new, universal health care. That was when they were first trying to talk about how to put that legislation together. And in order to appease the conservative right, the Republicans, they decided to leave out reproductive rights. And so the black women were like, well, how are you going to, most women's health care engagement is around our reproductive health.
Absolutely.
So how are you going to leave that out of universal health care just to pass a piece of legislation? We need something more than that. And not only that, but we're not even talking about rights at this point. We're talking about maternal health.
Right.
We're talking about where people give birth, how they give birth. So we're talking about traditional birth. We're talking about what happens with midwives. We're talking about poor women who are being sentenced to sterilization because of drug use. Whatever it is, it's so much bigger than this issue around abortion and contraception.
Absolutely.
That we need another thing. We need to think about the whole experience of social justice, which is what we need as black people, and reproductive rights, which is what we need as women, and put it together, and that's how we get reproductive justice. And so now we bring in that to the breast cancer space to talk about, how about homeless people? How are we addressing women who are homeless? There's a bigger issue than self-breast exam and getting mammograms. There's an
discrepancy in care in terms of actually treatment for breast cancer.
And where and how they get that care and treatment.
How do the policies affect black women.
And how's it funded?
There you go. Let me take you to another thing very quickly and stuff. We always talk about stories and stuff like that. Not in the Bush Woman's a story that has a happy ending and everything like that. When you talk about this project, can you describe what a happy ending is for this project?
A happy ending, I think, for this project is, one, we're going to teach people who are already deeply committed and engaged in this work how to center the people who have been left in the margins. That's the first thing. So if we start to see more programs that include those stories, that include those messages, outside of the ones that we're working to include, then that's a happy ending. Another happy ending, of course, is that we're going to have a whole lot more people who understand how to do self-breast exams. And that they not only, as the doctor that we spoke with, about a year and a half ago, who said that she's an MD who had just been diagnosed.
You remember?
Sister of mine. I remember every word she said.
Kyle, I think it was. And
when she said that she truly believed that, at least for black women, that is really not about testing your or checking your breasts once a month. She's like, I should have been checking mine every day. Because if people really understood the difference with TNBC versus some of the other forms of breast cancer, it is aggressive, it is rapid. You can feel a tiny lump today that can be a golf ball by the end of the month. So, I mean, there's changes that happen a lot more rapidly that we should be aware of. And so those are the kinds of things I want. I want people to know what it means to be black, to have female identity at any point in your life. And let's be real now. As long as you got hormones, as long as you got lymph nodes and glands, and you got chests and breasts and nipples, you should be checking.
Right.
It doesn't matter what your gender identity is.
Very
because
good point.
we want people to know what this thing is and why it's so deeply about us. And that's the same way we've been able to address HIV for over 30 years.
There you go. Well, I think that for the sake of time and stuff, we're going to be, I'm going to have to cut some of this off, but I thank you for including the Edmond project in the NANA project. Overall, I hope that in the end, at the end of the 6 months, we come to terms in terms of to create some of this vision and to create that messaging that can reach that broader public Well, we're getting our feet, I think, over the next month. We're really excited about the 28th of October event, but I'm more excited about the fact that we're actually going to have a presence at a Black homecoming next week at Clark, Atlanta. You'll be able to come over and see the Nana Project, where we have a QR code, where we're teaching people the exam and getting people and letting them and making them aware of triple negative breast cancer.
Let this just be the first of many.
That's right. Well, the second one's going to be the Morehouse Spelman.
Yes.
And so literally what we've been able to do is partner with the pre-med students at Clark AU and with an alumni group at Clark AU to basically put this out. And then we'll partner with the pre-med students at Morehouse College in order to be able to do it for the Morehouse homecoming.
Love it.
Wish us well and stuff. Also, we're going to be trying to come out with some other formats that are of the message, the health message, that are broader and stuff. And of course, we'll depend on your expertise and guidance as we do that. This is DK Edmond. I'm going to close out. Sister Dazon, can you take us home with one of those comments?
First of all, gratitude goes both ways. I want to thank you for saying yes. Because I know this is your baby too, and you trusted us to put it in a framework that's going to do things differently in community, and you're already making that happen. And what I think is most important is that it doesn't matter what station in life we are in, is that if we have an idea, if we have a story to tell it. Because your story is your power, and that story has the power to get connected to someone else's story. And that's where we find the possibility for change.